Hello, everybody.
Hi, Dory.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm a little bit under the weather. I think I got something and not sure what.
Oh no, sorry to hear that. Something's
Yeah,
going
it's all
around for
right.
sure.
It does, it does. I got some testing and, yeah, it's not COVID, it's not strep, but it is something.
Yeah. Hey, Gabby. Already, everybody. We'll give it a couple more minutes as we continue to. Do you think we should get started, Gabby? I'll defer to you.
I think that sounds fine.
Alrighty. You get slides, please.
Recording in progress.
All right. Okay, good evening, everyone. This is a public meeting of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, Policy and Reform Subcommittee. Appreciate you all for being here tonight. And I will pass it to our chair, Gabby, to lead us through the intro.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. Can I just see how many? There's 15 people here. Okay. Yeah, my name is Gabby. I'm the chair. This is my first meeting as the chair. So if it gets a little rough, that's why. So we're going to start with a few announcements. We're going to do updates, and then we're going on to a presentation by Ashley Lancaster, who is going to go over our police directives. We're going to have more conversation in some areas. We're going to have some Q&A with Ashley around the police directives. But first, I think are we going to do our community agreements first? Sounds good.
Sorry, back to the slide. Iman and Liz is out again, so Iman and I are handling the slide portion. So
Liz's
yeah.
value once again is very clear. So
She's got the slides on lock for sure. She's got the timing perfectly down.
No, so good at. Well, let's just, I guess, start with introduction. So, like I said, my name's Gabby. I am chair. I'll pass it on to Conrad.
Thanks, Gabby. I'm Conrad Hewlin, he, him, and so excited to be here. Congratulations, first meeting, Gabby, and pass it over to Kip.
hi there, Kip Silverman, he, him pronouns, and co-chair of the full committee. And I will hand it off to, is that it?
Caitlin.
Caitlin, I'm sorry. There you are, Caitlin. I apologize. I'll hand it off to Caitlin. Hi.
No worries. My computer's really having some trouble tonight, so we'll see how long we last out. I'm Caitlin Davidson. I don't know what all we were supposed to be introducing because I just hopped in.
Just your name.
Yourself. Yeah.
There we go. I did it. Yay.
There we go. Yay. And then not here right now is other members, Jorge and Pastor Weisner. I haven't joined yet, but they probably will be in here later. Okay, if does staff want to introduce themselves?
Yeah, any city staff, feel free to jump in after me. I'm Dory Brabinski, PCCEP Program Manager.
Hi, everybody. My name is Iman Gassemi. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator. Happy to be here.
Any PPB want to introduce themselves?
Sure, I'll
Sure.
start.
Go for it, Adrian. I think that was
Oh,
you.
Ashley, please go ahead.
Thanks. I'm Ashley Lancaster. I'm the team lead for the policy development team at PPB.
And I'm Adrian Matika. I'm a lieutenant with PPB, and I'm currently assigned to the chief's office.
Hi, I'm Laurel, also with PPB. I work with Ashley on the policy team.
And hi, I'm Chris Lindsay. I'm the commander of the Professional Standards Division for the Portland Police Bureau.
Great, thanks so much. And thanks, Barb, for getting it started. Any community members want to introduce themselves in the chat? That is great. And I think we're going back to the slides, yeah? Thanks so much. All right, well, like I said, we're going to start the night with some community agreements. Would anybody like to volunteer, put their hand up real quick? They want to read them, otherwise I'll do it. Conrad, thanks so much.
Community agreements. Listen actively and respectfully. Share airtime. Be present and open to new information and perspectives. Assume positive intent. Respect each other. Respect the group. Speak your truth. Communicate directly, honestly, and respectfully. Ask questions to clarify. Call out bias. And our favorite, be okay with ambiguity.
Thank you so much. All right, just a quick overview. We're going to be having our updates starting real soon. We're going to have Ashley. We're so grateful to have Ashley here tonight going over the directive review process, and that will just be a general information presentation. Then we'll have like a Q&A from both the committee and the public at the end of that. And then we'll just have a general time for open comment at the end. Yeah, all right, let's get into it. Our updates. Okay, so our status conference hearing. I don't know, Dory, do you want to do this? I mean, I could just read these off, or if you have any extra information.
Sure, I'm happy to give a brief overview. I think a lot of folks who have joined us tonight are familiar with this process, but for anyone who's not, the status conference hearings are periodic gatherings of everybody involved in the DOJ versus City of Portland settlement agreement. And basically, it's just a time for the parties to talk about the independent monitor's compliance reports, kind of resolve or discuss any sort of different points of view, areas that have improved, ongoing challenges, that kind of thing. And this happens in front of Judge Michael Simon, who is a federal judge. So we have one coming up on July 29th at the Marquette Field Courthouse. And PCCEP will be delivering a statement at that hearing, which they do at every hearing. And also members of the public are able to speak during that hearing as well. Go ahead.
Dory, sorry, the day is correct. It's Tuesday, but it's actually July 28th. Don't want people to get confused.
I appreciate that. I was looking at it and I was like, I thought it was the 28th. I must have just typed it wrong. So appreciate that correction. Yes, it is July 28th, which is a Tuesday. Thank you for that. But yeah, just updating folks that is happening. And then in PCCEP's full committee meeting next week, they'll be working on their statement together.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Shall we move on to the next? Thank you. So PCCEP received a letter about the Joint Terrorism Task Force and PPB's participation. I'm going to read that, or we will read that. Sorry, I'm going to try to change my view. We just thought it was important. It was an important letter, and we wanted to make sure it was shared. Does anybody want to read this together? I'm totally fine reading this. Any PCCEP members want to do that? As I bring it up? Sounds good. I was planning on reading it. This, sorry. Great. Pardon. Okay. I'd like to, let you know the folks who did sign this letter. This letter was signed by the Jewish Palestinian Alliance of Oregon, ACLU of Oregon, the League of Women Voters of Portland, Portland Cop Watch and Peace and Justice Works, Islamic Society of Greater Portland, Brandon Mayfield, who is a survivor of improper FBI spying, the National Lawyers Guild of Portland, Japanese American Citizens League, Portland Harbor Community Coalition, Portland Metro People's Coalition, and the Albina Ministerial Alliance for Justice and Police Reform. And I am going to read their letter now. It's a bit long. We're going to do it. It's just long to read. You'll love it. So, dear members of the Portland City Council, we write regarding the 2026 Portland Police Bureau Criminal Intelligence Unit Annual Report on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is called JTTF, submitted January 20th, 2026. While the report reflects limited formal involvement in 2025, it highlights significant gaps in oversight and accountability under the current framework. Council should consider, if not disengage from the JTTF altogether, revising the policy so that PPB participation occurs only when there is documented probable cause of a specific criminal offense involving terrorism or a clearly imminent threat to life. At the same time, the reporting framework must be strengthened to ensure meaningful oversight. At a minimum, future reports should include how each investigation originated, the specific facts establishing the criminal predicate under Oregon law, investigative steps taken and outcomes, disclosure of informal contacts and consultations, confirmation that protected political, religious, and associational activity was not used as a basis for investigation, and clarification of any information sharing through other agencies or intelligence systems. Reports should remain focused on factual, objective descriptions of PPB activities and should not include federal public safety messaging or generalized language that encourages suspicion of community members. If these reforms cannot be implemented, Council should strongly consider whether continued participation in the JTTF remains consistent with the purpose of the 2019 resolution. Given evolving federal policies and investigative priorities, it may be increasingly difficult to reconcile federal counterterrorism frameworks with Oregon law and Portland's commitments to civil liberties and community trust. This report indicates that in 2025, there was one request from the FBI for temporary PPB participation, one case referred from the FBI to PPB, and 2 cases referred from PPB to the FBI, along with limited follow-up on prior cases. While this relatively low level of formal involvement is encouraging, the report continues to provide minimal factual detail, making it difficult for Council or the public to determine whether these investigations fall within the narrow limits contemplated by the 2019 resolution. For example, the report does not explain how the cases came to the attention of the FBI or PPB, what specific facts establish the criminal nexus required under Oregon law, what investigative steps were taken, or why certain cases were ultimately closed or suspended. Without such information, Council cannot meaningfully determine whether participation was appropriate or consistent with Oregon's restrictions on intelligence gathering. This lack of detail reflects a broader structural issue. The current standard, reasonable grounds to suspect criminal conduct, provides insufficient protection against investigations rooted in ideology, association, or protected political activity. A documented probable cause threshold would both protect civil liberties and allow future reports to demonstrate clearly why each case met that standard. Additional oversight gaps remain. The report tracks only formal referrals and temporary assignments, but does not disclose how often PPB officers engage in informal consultations with federal agencies, exchange information outside formal cases, or participate in discussions that never result in an official investigation. Without reporting on these interactions, Council cannot assess whether intelligence sharing may be occurring in ways that circumvent the safeguards established in the resolution or Oregon law. A related concern involves information sharing through Oregon Titan Fusion Center or similar intelligence systems. Because these systems allow federal partners, including the FBI, to access locally generated data, information may reach federal authorities even when no formal JTTF referral occurs. For example, it's unclear whether routine criminal justice information such as inmate booking data, identity information, addresses, or immigration-related indicators may be accessible through these systems. Clarification is necessary to ensure that such information sharing does not undermine Oregon's restrictions on intelligence gathering or its limitations on the use of local resources for federal immigration enforcement. The report also continues to include federal counterterrorism messaging that is inappropriate in an oversight document. Statements that the public is the first line of defense or references to see something, say something campaigns encourage reporting of vague suspicious activity and risk reinforcing surveillance based on bias or association rather than criminal conduct. This language has been criticized in prior reports and should not appear in a document intended to provide neutral fact-based oversights. These concerns are heightened by the broader national environment in which federal enforcement actions have increasingly targeted immigrants, religious minorities, and political movements. Public trust in local law enforcement is undermined when local agencies appear to participate in federal investigative structures without clear safeguards. Recent events in Portland underscore these risks. Following a January 2026 immigration enforcement operation in which federal agents shot and wounded 2 individuals, protests intensified at the ICE facility. Federal officers subsequently deployed tear gas and projectile munitions against demonstrators, and a federal judge imposed restrictions on the use of such force against individuals who posed no imminent threat. These events demonstrate the importance of ensuring that Portland's participation in federal counterterrorism structure does not entangle the city in actions that undermine civil liberties or chill lawful protests. The report further raises concerns about oversight itself. It states that CIU Sergeant maintains a security clearance for full oversight, yet does not explain the level of that clearance, what information it permits access to, or whether elected officials or civilian oversight bodies have comparable access. If oversight is effectively limited to a single cleared officer within PPB, it is difficult to see how meaningful civilian oversight can occur. These concerns are compounded by the reality that local officers participating in federal task force investigations may operate under legal frameworks and investigative practices that differ significantly from Oregon law and local policing standards. When police officers are embedded in such environments, particularly where federal practices may be aggressive or legally contested, the city faces serious questions regarding accountability, liability, and ethical obligations. We appreciate the council's attention to this issue and its continued commitment to ensuring the Portland's public safety policies reflect both effective policing and the protection of civil liberties. So we just wanted to make sure that was heard by the community. Does anybody, we got a lot of stuff in the chat. Does anybody want to comment from the PCCEP committee or staff? Anything to add? Thanks, Dory, for adding in the chat. High-level summary, the authors and undersigned ask that the Portland either end its participation in the JTTF or strengthen both the legal limits on participation and the transparency required to facilitate civilian oversight and protect civil liberties. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the rest of the updates. If we could get back the Slides, please. Thank you. Great. So we are expecting the annual PPB stops report to come out in the next couple months. I don't think we have a full date like confirmed of when we're going to get that. And of course, but we would like, we're planning for our August meeting to present on that report, which includes summary of analysis. So on previous years, the annual report it's expected in the next few months. Our scoping for the future meeting, like how should PCCEP engage with this report? In one regard, we're really expecting to have a lot of conversation on benchmarks, how the benchmarks are used in previous reports. The analysis that came out had found that there was no improper or that there was no, how did they say it? There was no racial profiling in police stops using specific benchmarks. We plan on having a discussion around those benchmarks and any sort of controversies, why those benchmarks are moved, et cetera. We sort of just want to move that conversation along because while the analysis is clear, it's based on certain information that I think just needs to be discussed with the community, as well as just what that data looks like. Does anybody want to ask any questions or share anything about that?
Go ahead, Conrad.
Yeah, I think it's a great start, Gabby, and I'm really looking forward to that. My interest is sustainability and what we do, so that, you know, years and years to come, that the community is doing something similar. You know, it may not be the same song, but at least it rhymes. So I'd really be keen on us being able to do something along the lines of, at the risk of sounding like a shareholder meeting, an executive summary of just like, hey, here's what we notice as the baseline. Here's what we notice as a trend. And the most important thing about data is just being able to call out and be able to have the conversation with the city and with the Bureau of, if we notice something's not being measured, it's just a question, why isn't it, right? The best disinfectant is sunshine. Let's have that conversation so it's in the public record, it's documented, and then it's something that we can build off of. And, you know, you and us and this group have started something that can exist in perpetuity rather than trying to concern ourselves with a, you know, 5-page annotated bibliography report that who knows if that's going to continue. But I think if we're able just to summarize and just make a snapshot, we're able to change the narrative. So that's my, I guess, 5 cents. That was a little more than 2.
Yeah, well, we definitely, I mean, I totally appreciate that. Hopefully we'll have, so it's a full on like analysis, the report that comes out. And so we definitely plan on, I would like to have PPB come, or the person who basically does this analysis give us a presentation on what the report says. But then we should definitely have our own discussion before, you know, having read the report, and give our own, you know, sort of like discuss what we want to bring up, the issues that we want to bring up. And I totally appreciate what you said, Conrad. And I'm sorry that we don't have a specific date, but I mean, we're saying August and we're pretty sure. So we really do hope folks come back for that August meeting, ready with questions and ready to really talk about this stops data. But we'll also be providing more information on that so everyone is more prepared in our July meeting. All right, shall we move on to the next update? Oh, sorry, actually.
Yeah, a couple hands. Go ahead, Kip.
Yeah, just quick comment. Sorry, can you hear me okay? Okay, quick comment on previous stops reports. What we've done, we've had the analyst who helped compile it, one of the analysts who helped compile it, attend, as well as some PPB leadership to take questions from PCCEP. So, and traditionally what we've seen is questions about methodology and best practices and such. So I do, to Conrad's point, it's dense and complicated. But yeah, there's going to be there should be an opportunity once again to see what has changed since the last time we've done the report out, and how the methodologies are improving, so on and so forth. So I look forward to that.
I also want to say that I intend to, at the next subcommittee meeting, like be providing more actual information so we can do just that. Like, so we have all the same reading materials, so we're all basically discussing the same matter.
Commander Lindsay, you have something to add?
Yeah, sorry. So I'm fairly certain, and I'm just double checking right now, that the stops data report for the settlement agreement needs to be submitted to PCCEP by June 30th.
Great.
So you should be getting that in the very, very near future. And so people have time to read it and digest it before any meetings going forward. So I just wanted to point that out. So
Thank you so much.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I put this in the chat, but Pastor Reisner, I see your real hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my toolbar here, but I can't work it out so well today. Hello, everyone. I apologize for being late. I was looking at the one of the questions in the chat about FitCog stop report. I believe that was a concern from the last year report that went out, because specifically the way that I believe Gina at the chair at the FitCod at that time, there was a community meeting about how it wasn't designed, or the report is not so specific about the stops that FitCog did, because FitCog's under a specialty or something like that. But I think trying to get maybe Captain Lindsay or someone from PB to better bring out, does the fit stops deal with any of the areas that was concerned, such as the racial profiling and other things that they were specifically talking about last year. I'm not sure what the results were from out of that. I didn't follow it that close.
No,
I don't know. I haven't seen the report. So until the report comes out, we won't be able to answer that. So
Prior reports, what I'm referring to.
I do believe, based on what I remember about the last annual reports, I do believe that it is broken out. But I think this discussion is good because, as I put in the chat, I think the SSD team, Strategic Services Division, they're great and super responsive, and they've come to our meetings before and presented on the report. But I think that it is really worth thinking about for our committee members and members of the public, if you happen to be at any of those meetings in the past, like thinking about what would help make this more accessible. So just giving PPV enough time to kind of prepare, like, for your questions and things like that. And then also it might lead to follow-up conversations where it might not be the SSD team who writes the report, who has that the stuff that, like, you want to talk about, the answers to those questions. It might be like the fit team. Maybe you have questions based on what you learn in the report. So just things to be thinking about as we kind of plan these next couple months of meetings, and especially for this subcommittee.
And then I'm sorry, what does FIT stand for?
That is the Focused Intervention Team,
Okay.
which
Specialized unit.
Okay, great.
It used to be, well, a different version of it used to be the Gang Violence Unit. It is now the Focused Intervention Team.
Sounds good. Okay, great. Thank you. And then I just want to answer Barb. So also the stops reports are available on the city's website. So you can look up all the past reports, all the annual reports so far, all the quarterly reports. But that 2025 data is not up yet. And we will be sharing the information that we have in our July meeting. but you can look up any of the past information right now. And like I said, in the next meeting, in the next policy meeting, we're going to be sharing the information that we are going to be discussing in the August meeting. Okay, so thank you. All right, I think we can go into.
Yeah, just one more quick update here, and then we will move into the main portion of the meeting. There we go.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then in an upcoming meeting, and I think, Dory, do we want to say that this is going to be the July meeting? That we are going to be talking about the use of force in the independent monitor report?
I would say tentatively that absolutely could be your agenda, depending on, I think, probably the independent monitor's availability. But yeah, I think that's definitely realistic.
Okay, yeah. So our August meeting is set that is going to be stops data. We're hoping that the next meeting for July is we're going to be discussing and having presentation on the independent monitor reports and the use of force reports. And that is going to be talking about, yeah, categories of use of force, disciplinary measures, and the process when there are complaints, what that process and what the disciplinary process looks like within PPB. And basically how, yeah, metrics. So how it's measured, like why something goes into a certain category of use of force. There's also, we are going to be talking about the reduction of use of force that was reported as well. But we won't get too much into that right now, but that is probably going to be a part that we discuss hopefully next month. And if not, it will be the month in September, but it's probably going to be next month. Pastor Weisner?
Question on the outline that you had under the how does discipline rise to the level?
Mhm.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go on.
My thought is that independent and meaning the training division, or who are you specifically pulling out of the report that they have to talk about use of force and how it categorized? I'm kind of, because I don't think the independent monitor is going to be able to answer for PBB about how it rises to the levels of use of force or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's going to be some stuff that's separate between independent monitor and the PPB. We're also, I do think, going to be getting a little bit into the police review board and how, like, because we're going to be talking about how discipline works in PPB, and that sometimes is going to get into police review stuff as well. So we're going to be bringing in information from a couple of different like groups within, the government.
Yeah, I would just say, I think this is meant to be an update. Like, this is something Gabby as chair is interested in developing for the upcoming meeting. But Pastor Reisner, you're totally right to point out that it is a multifaceted system. So it may well be that PCCEP invites someone from IPR, from the independent monitor. I know Commander Lindsay, you used to work with internal affairs, is that right? Yeah, also very relevant.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have, I think, a lot of great people we could bring into that conversation, and so we'll work on shaping that up, and yeah.
Great, and I have a lot of experience.
Great. I mean, I guess we should talk about when would we like to have like we could talk about this, an internal meeting before this meeting, probably, yeah. We could talk about
definitely, that. Yes, definitely to plan. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, to plan it.
All right.
Okay, great. All right. And I believe that brings us to the end of our updates. And so we're going to turn it over to Ashley Lancaster. We're so thankful to have her here to tell us all about how the policy directives work and to take all of our questions. So can I pass it on to you, Ashley, with the...
Absolutely, thank you. I want to check, am I able to share my screen? I do have
Yeah, I just made you a co-host.
Okay, perfect. Now to go through my 1,000 tabs. Everyone makes fun of me because I have just a lot of stuff open on my computer.
I'm
So
the same way. Yeah.
it's organized chaos, I swear. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So first I will say, if you see me looking down, I have a few notes that I've jotted down to just keep me on task. This is a very interesting topic for me as well. So sometimes my thoughts and sentences meander, so I am trying to keep my thoughts as organized as possible. Um, Thanks for having us. Again, I'm Ashley Lancaster. I head up the policy development team at PPB. Laurel Green Mitchell is also on the call. She's a non-sworn member who's an analyst on the team. And Anika Bent Albert is our dedicated city attorney. So she works out of the city attorney's office. She does assist with other city bureaus, but one of her primary assignments is to serve as an advice attorney as part of the policy review and development process. So I'm going to offer a very, very, very brief history of the history of directive development in the Bureau, how we've historically done it, how we do it now. We'll define what a directive is and talk about its purpose from our team's perspective. We'll walk through some of the steps in our updated review process. We just updated the directive that governs our directive development and review. I believe that was in April of this year. That's directive number 10, creatively entitled Directives Review and Development Process. We'll talk through some of the goals that we set for ourselves when creating new policy and the challenges that we encounter in the process. And then Dory, you had asked me to sort of think about the ways in which we might be able to strengthen the relationship between my team specifically and the PCCEP. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then Laurel's going to do a very short tutorial of our website because we've made a lot of changes to that in light of the directive update. And I will say I can't see anyone. My screen is entirely filled out by my slide presentation, so please just interrupt me if you have any questions along the way. But I'll try to get through this relatively quickly to allow for a more fulsome conversation at the end of it. Okay, so prior to 2015, 2014, and sort of the early days of the settlement agreement, prior to the settlement agreement, I should say, the Bureau, from my understanding, utilized a more decentralized approach to policy. They didn't have a dedicated team, there was no dedicated staff, and the function or the duty of reviewing policy was largely outsourced to individual units or responsibility units or divisions or individual members based on their expertise, based on their current role. But there was no sort of central entity that managed that process. And then in 2014, 2015, in response to the settlement agreement, the Bureau hired one person to manage the entire process, and they adopted more of a hybrid approach because of their limited capacity, and would still sort of utilize that outsourcing approach of assigning directives for review to certain areas, but performing kind of a both traffic control and quality control function to just try to ensure consistency with the settlement agreement at that time, directive consistency with the settlement agreement, and also consistency across all other policies. But that person was a staff of one, and they did not last long. I think they left after about a year of doing that work. And then in 2016, fall of 2016, that's when I joined the Bureau. The Bureau created a dedicated team whose sole purpose was to review directives, engage with stakeholders, conduct research, but actually poured resources into doing this work in a more strategic way. So they hired me, another analyst, a non-sworn analyst, and there was a lieutenant who headed the unit at that time. And we've always had that dedicated attorney spot as well. I think the increased capacity has certainly led to us applying more of a global perspective to the work and thinking about, the importance of consistency in language, in addition to just consistency across like requirements from policy to policy, but also thinking about the implications of making certain changes to policy. So instead of writing in a silo, right, I've just been assigned Directive 1010 use of force. I'm the assigned member back in our decentralized days. I'm not thinking about any other policy. We're now approaching it from the perspective of, okay, if we change this in the force policy, what does that mean for our public order policy? What does that mean for our report writing policy, our vehicle pursuit policy? So just adopting more of a global perspective in developing policy. So the italicized text is just verbatim the definition of a directive in our directive number 10. Again, that's the directive that governs our directives review and development process. You'll hear me use the word directive and the words directive and policy kind of interchangeably. I think they're synonymous with each other for our purposes here. But directives are essentially just a collection of rules that everyone who works for PPB must follow. From our perspective, our team's perspective, the purpose of directive is, again, establish the rules and standard of conduct for all Bureau employees. But more simply, we view our role as establishing the bumpers for all members in different subject areas, the sort of minimum standards, and maybe we have greater expectations, but the rules as outlined in directives are the minimum standards. We view directives as speaking to the Bureau's values and aspirational goals. You'll see some of this, I hesitate to use the word softer, but like less directive language, more aspirational acknowledgement of community impact. You'll see that language in our policies section of our policies, of our directives. And then we sort of go into the procedure section, which tells officers what to do and other Bureau members. Another important purpose of directives, again, from our perspective, is informing the community about what our practices are in a particular regard. So if a community member calls 911 because they observe a person who they believe to be experiencing a mental health crisis, and maybe that person is armed and they're concerned about their safety or the safety of others, Directive 85020, the police response to mental health crisis, informs that individual of what should happen when we respond to those types of calls. So the purpose of the directive is to communicate to folks, this is what you should expect if we're adhering to policy when we respond to certain types of events. Any questions so far? Just give myself an opportunity to take a sip.
I have.
Okay. Oh, sure, go for it.
I'm trying to find my reaction button so I don't be interrupting. Sorry. Here we are. Under the definition of purpose, in the example of 850 that you use, but it says the bumper is minimum standard. Minimum standard is the expectation of what it is to start with when you're on such an example of going out and following how to respond in that term of whatever the call is. Minimum standard is what I'm trying to say. Is what does minimum standard mean? Is there more that should be?
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't say that policies exclusively outline minimum standards. I think that's a primary purpose, is to establish minimum standards. I think there are certainly policies that more clearly are more prescriptive or articulate more stringent expectations. The policies that implicate one's constitutional rights come to mind. So you'll find that our policy on like search and seizure, use of force, those tend to be a little more prescriptive. But when I say bumpers, I think also training kind of is a factor on establishing what expectations are, but it's just sort of baseline rules. We expect you to do at least this. And then there are mediums through which we kind of expound upon that through policy, through training, through SOPs, through coaching that occurs after an incident. But the directives, a primary purpose, again, from our perspective of directives, is this is sort of the, and I don't know if you can see me motioning, but I'm holding up two hands as if like to indicate a spectrum. Our directives outline the sort of polar ends of a spectrum and inform members the sort of floor and ceiling through which they can operate. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
let me
okay.
make sure it's clear in my head.
Okay.
Because that was the reason I was thinking of like use of force with the Garrett and the state statutes and all that. It's already a standard there. They have to move into those areas, making sure that they meet that requirement. But then I understand what I'm separating in my thoughts now is like the SOPs. It's more of a policy standard is minimum where that is separates from what it is, and then moving into different areas of those directives. And depending on what directives, if we use 110 like use of force, it has a different set of standards of what it needs to be, but a minimum standard for how you would conduct yourself if you were coming to work.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And I would say one thing that you said just sort of triggered something for me. You know, the state law really like establishes the minimum standard.
Right.
Any agency in Oregon can have standards that are more restrictive than the state law. So state law is truly like the floor. And I think just looking at this through the lens of the sort of micro lens of our agency, we consider like all of our policies need to comport with the law at a minimum. Our minimums might be more restrictive than state minimums. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does to me. I was just making sure I understood when he was going through it that I had that walk away thought. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate your question. Thank you. Any other questions on this slide? And again, I can't see anyone, so please feel free to just jump in. Okay, we can always come back. So this is our process, sort of a visual of our process. Some of the steps might look familiar to folks, and I meant to say at the outset, I recognize a few names and faces, so it's nice to see folks again, and nice to meet new members and new community participants. So I'm going to first talk through some of our steps, or all of our steps. I'm going to focus on process initiation on the next slide, so we're going to move through that kind of quickly, and then I'll talk about the changes that occurred in this most recent Directive 10 update. And again, that was in April of this year. So there are a few factors that might inform our decision to review a policy. We just sort of oversimplification, but refer to that here on the slide as process initiation. Once we decide that we're going to review a policy for whatever reason, which we'll discuss that again in the next slide, the next step in our process is called executive reconciliation. It's basically the stage at which our team is researching case law, other jurisdictions' policies. We consult with subject matter experts. We'll reach out to the city attorney's office and sort of keep them apprised as we're developing drafts. And if we have any legal questions, we'll connect with internal and external stakeholders as appropriate, and we'll develop a draft. Once we have a draft policy, we then post it for public comment for a 60-day period, and that's a new step in the process, and I'll speak to that change here in a moment. But so we post the draft policy, and we couple that with a red line copy of the policy as well that reflects the changes between the proposed policy or the draft policy and the existing policy, so folks can get a clear sense of what we're actually trying to change. The city attorneys, like I said, are sort of involved in that executive reconciliation process, but to the extent that we need them to do a deeper dive from a legal perspective, they'll also do that during that 60-day period. Once the 60-day public comment period ends, there are certain policies that are relevant to state established standards. And so the Bureau now has an accreditation manager who works out of the training division. We'll send policies to that individual so they can review the policy through the lens of ensuring that the policy still comports with at a minimum, the state standard that's been established through the accreditation process. The PPA and PPCOA, the police unions, per their labor agreements, are entitled to a 15 business day review of all directives, and that translates to about 21 calendar days. So they conduct their review, identify if they have any issues that are mandatory subjects of bargaining for which they want to bargain, assert their bargaining rights. If that goes smoothly without a hitch, we then submit policies to the DOJ and the monitor. And I say if applicable there because those are only policies that pertain or fall within the scope of the settlement agreement. We don't send all policies to the DOJ and the monitor. So use of force, the accountability suite, the mental health related policies, all of those will go to the monitor and the DOJ for a 21-day review as well. And again, if everything goes smoothly, we reach agreement. Sometimes there's back and forth where we have to meet with those groups to sort of discuss changes and potentially revisit language. But once we finalize that process, we submit the policy to the chief for approval. The chief will sign the directive. Internally, we release that in our learning management system. And every member, sworn and non-sworn, must sign, read, and sort of sign off on the policy in the learning management system. They have 30 days to do that. And then publicly, we also post an executive summary that describes the sort of what the review entailed, stakeholders that were involved in the review process. And we do our best to address like actionable recommendations that we receive during the public comment process and speak to why we did or didn't adopt or couldn't adopt certain recommendations. We include in that summary a clean copy of the policy and a red line copy, and then all of the public comments that we receive. And all of that is available on our website. Laurel will touch on that in a bit. In terms of the major changes from our last process to our new one, the 60-day public comment period is probably the most notable change. What drove that decision was primarily two factors. One, we didn't see a lot of utility or a lot of value in posting the current policy for public comment because those policies are always available. So they're, in theory, anyone can comment on any policy at any time. They're accessible, and we didn't receive a high volume of comments at that stage of the process. And of the comments that we would receive, they were typically making recommendations that we had already anticipated. So responsive to a change in the law, or just identifying the sheer fact that maybe the policy was old and just needed to be updated. So we were already anticipating those changes anyway. So we just didn't see a lot of value and having that first universal review and public comment period. Secondly, we received community feedback asking for more time to comment on policies, primarily just given sort of monthly meeting schedules, like the PCCEP I know meets on a monthly basis. So allowing more time to contemplate the changes that we're proposing to policy. So that was a big motivator as well. Other key changes that we made, and I should say before moving on, we formalized what we're now calling open engagement, and Laurel will touch on this when she shows you the website, but formalizing the medium through which folks can comment on current or active policies. We created a survey link, so anyone could submit, anyone could always email us, of course, to submit comments on policies, but if there's a policy that's of interest to you, we now have a survey and a means by which we will year-round, even if we're not reviewing a policy, allow for the submission of comments. So we formalized that a bit to sort of offset the absence of that first public comment period. We defined during the directive review for directive number 10, we defined critical terms. It sounds really silly, but we, I think, improved upon the definition of directive. We define, you'll see in our directives, there are headers for each section. There's a refer section, which is typically comprised of relevant statutes or case law or city code, other governing sources that are relevant to that particular subject. We actually define what refer means. We define what policy means, what the definitions and the procedure sections. So defining key steps in the process. We modified our review schedule. And so this is mostly to just address our limited capacity. So we have just shy of 200 directives. I think we're somewhere in the ballpark of like 180, 190 at this point. And all of those directives historically have been on primarily 2-year cycles. For DOJ policies. Historically, those were on annual review cycles. And so it just wasn't realistic or sustainable for a team of 2.5, 3 people with the city attorney's office to maintain that review cycle and ensure that we're laying eyes on what we believe to be the most critical policies. So, for example, we're retaining the 2-year cycle for sort of core policies like use of force, deadly force, foot pursuits, vehicle pursuits, search and seizures, things that sort of, again, are related to one's constitutional rights and where there are changes in the law kind of frequently, and where we just need to bring a more critical eye on to policy. And we're going to extend the review period. By extend, I mean the duration between review cycles for other policies that are less critical in the sense that I'm discussing here. So we have a directive. It used to be called radio use. I think it's now communication technology or something along those lines. But the radios that officers use, the expectation was that we were going to review that on the same cycle as our use of force policy. So we're just trying to allow for a little more flexibility so we can be responsive to critical changes to high impact directives. Any questions before I move to the next slide? And I'm going to take a sip here.
Yeah, I did just want to ask really fast. So you're saying like with use of force, you look at it every 2 years, no matter what. And then I'm curious, what is it the same sort of thing? Like you decide if it needs to be reviewed by doing research and whatnot, that research is done either way? Or is it if something comes up that makes you think there needs to be changes, then you go into the review process?
So I'm going to go to the next slide. Was that Gabby that asked that question? Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go to the next slide. And if I don't answer your question, maybe ping me again. So this slide sort of speaks to not how, but what informs our decision to review a policy. And I'll touch on what's maybe not as clear on this slide is just how we prioritize directives. So I think the list is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll offer up a couple of examples to illustrate the points here. So changes in case law or statutory changes. Great example of that was, in response to the 2020 public order events, the state law changed around certain weapons that police agencies could use for crowd management, crowd control. So that directly impacted our Directive 63510, our directive on public order events. Community needs might inform our decision to start a review. So many years ago, I think it was maybe like 5 or so at this point, this group, the PCCEP, recommended that we create a procedural justice directive. And we did in response to that request. Court monitor, DOJ might point out a need to update language in a DOJ directive, or again, a directive that falls within the scope of the settlement agreement. There might be council ordinance. There's been a lot of council activity lately that's impacted our directives and kind of forced us to be nimble and responsive to changes that have been offered up by city council. Sometimes we need to review a policy for clarification. So if we notice maybe inconsistencies in interpretation of policy, we'll launch a review off schedule to, particularly if it's one of the critical policies that I've mentioned, to ensure that everybody has the same understanding of what the policy is. Outside of that, Laurel and I are really prioritizing trying to get there's such a backlog from policies that just haven't been touched for years. I'm embarrassed to admit, but it's true. We try to prioritize, again, keeping eyes on the critical directives, ensuring that we don't fall behind on our use of force policy, search and seizure, those policies, but also trying to tackle the backlog. The backlog has been our kind of primary focus the last year or so. So I don't know, did I answer your question there? If not, would you mind restating it for me?
No, thank you so much. You did.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions here? Okay.
Hi, this is Caitlin. I had a question from the previous slide as well, but you don't have to go back or anything. Just the year-round emailing for public comment and things like that. What happens with those once they're the year-round ones like that are received?
That's a great question. So I think I hear you asking if you were to go use the link on our website, the open engagement link, to comment on a policy that isn't currently under review. Does it go into the round bin next to my desk, or what do we do with it? Is that correct? Okay. So we monitor those surveys, and the reality is it just sort of depends on the nature of the comment. If it seems as though there is an urgent need, and I couldn't really offer specifics on what that looks like, it's just sort of fact specific or case specific, to update the policy, it could trigger, us making that directive a priority. If it seems as though it's something that could wait until the scheduled review, we have electronic files of all of our directives, and we keep notes. And if we receive comments, we store them with the files so that we have that comment when we do actually start the review. So it just sort of depends on the nature of the comment, if there is like an operational need to address it or a community need to address it, and then we triage basically.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Ashley, there's a question in the chat. Will there be a calendar or yearly, quarterly listing of what is coming up next? And then a comment, please keep the dates of review on directive documents. Thanks.
Yes, so great question, and one that we've fielded from this group quite a few times before. Great recommendation. I wish that we could do it. The challenge is just sort of our limited capacity. We have to reserve a little bit of bandwidth for unanticipated policy priorities. And so we have a backlog that we're managing. We have directives that we try to keep on schedule. And then we also have to allow for a little capacity when there's an inevitable city council change and a deadline by which we need to create a policy. And so it's difficult. We could, in theory, we could create a calendar, but realistically, I don't see us sticking to it. And I'm just being totally honest, the other factor there is our process is, there are defined timelines for certain steps, and then there are others that are less predictable. So for example, if we, I'm working on a policy right now that I've been in touch with an internal stakeholder, and it's been difficult to get a response from them and to coordinate with that person, coordinate our schedules. And so it's kind of delayed the process, or the union will assert its bargaining rights and that sort of gets off ramped and has to be handled with the city attorney's office. And so there are defined timelines, but then there are these issues that we can't really predict that certainly adversely affect our timeline. So it's something that I aspire to. I'd love to get to a place where we could signal through a calendar directives that we anticipate working on. What we're trying to get to is, once we sort of resolve the backlog, ensuring that the dates that are reflected at the bottom of directives are actually accurate, that we're not missing review cycles. And I think there's a place in the long term where we will get to building a calendar and being able to stick to it, but we're not there right now. And then there was a second part to that question, Laurel.
Oh, it wasn't a question.
We-
It was just a request to keep our review
Oh,
dates
keep
on
the
the bottom
dates.
of all directives, which for anything we've worked on or done recently, they all should have that. And I mean, for in the last 10 years, probably. If there's one with no review dates at the bottom, it's overdue, we'll say.
Yeah, that's the indicator to you that if there's not a date, it's an old policy that we need to, that's part of the backlog, if you will. But our goal is to include review dates and effective dates at the bottom of every directive that we touch. Any other questions before I proceed with the next slide? Okay, great. And thank you for your questions. I prefer just sort of conversational, keeping things conversational rather than me talking at you. So please continue to offer up your questions and stop me if need be. So some of the, I don't think this is an exhaustive list of all of our goals, but some of the things that we, and this is a list of some of the factors that we consider when developing policy. And I will just say, you know, there are, as all of you probably know, or many of you, most of you know, there are no true national standards. There's no one entity that just sort of defines or blesses police practices. There are organizations that offer up model policies, but in sort of a one size fits all kind of way. So they're both catering to large metropolitan cities and small cities. And those model policies, I'm thinking specifically of like the International Association of Chiefs of Police, IACP. It's helpful to have that entity put out model policies, but they're usually a little like kind of dated in their practices. So not the best sources of information at the kind of national level and establishing what policing practices should be. And so we're kind of, for the lack of a better phrase, like flying blind in that regard. There just aren't really, other than what other jurisdictions are doing, there's no standard. Of course, the law. But so we want to ensure that our directives are consistent with current law, new laws, and other governing sources. By that, I mean the settlement agreement, city council ordinances, city code, state accreditation standards. I'm going to skip through here. Our second bullet there, you know, we, as I just said, we do look to other jurisdictions to, particularly in Oregon, since they are bound to the same state laws, to just see how they're doing things, if any agencies are doing things well, if there are ways in which we can improve upon their practices. So that's a big part of our research, is looking at how other agencies are doing this work. I think another really important point on this slide is the use of active voice. This is a top priority for us. If you look at some of our historic directives, older directives, there's a lot of passive voice. And by that, I mean, you'll have, just as an example, it might say, following an incident, a report must be written. And it's not entirely clear by whom. Does every officer on the scene have to write a report? Does only the involved officer? Does the supervisor? So there's a lot of that in our older policies. And so it's really important for us from an accountability standpoint, primarily, to use active voice to make it abundantly clear who's responsible for what in certain scenarios. So that's a big focus of ours, and particularly when we review older policies. Any questions here? Okay. Again, these are, I just want to check the time. I want to be mindful of the time. Pretty self-explanatory. I'll touch on a couple. So the challenges that we encounter when developing policy, laws, and at the state level, at the case law level, at the local level, are always changing. And our process, I mean, you saw a couple of steps account for about 4 months out of the process between public comment and union review and, when applicable, DOJ review. And so I would say on a good day, if everything goes smoothly, no hitches, we can finish a policy in 6 months. but realistically, it takes about 8 to 12 months. And so laws change, we have legislative sessions, it's difficult to be nimble, just given how quickly the standards change. Um, Making, balancing different interests, everyone who gets involved in the policy process internally and externally, there's disagreement. We have folks who have different interests depending on their assignment if they're in the Bureau, their lived experience if they're a community member, PCEP members, as you have kind of an accountability focus. And so it's really challenging to try to find the puzzle piece that fits, and recognizing when we can compromise and try to balance everyone's interests. Process engagement is just another one that I'll focus on. I think that's something that we're trying to improve with the recent changes that we made to our process, but we don't have a lot of engagement in our process or participation in our process. We talk to a lot of people, community groups and internal meetings, but when it comes down to it, not a lot of folks actually comment on our policies. And so we're certainly open to, we have a few ideas internally, but open to any recommendations from your group, your team, any others, community members, on how we can improve in that regard. But process engagement is kind of a challenge. It's difficult to account for certain voices if they're not at the table, and part of that might just be accessibility. Like maybe there are ways in which we can make our process more accessible. Okay, so again, Dory, you asked me to kind of think about the ways in which we might be able to, strengthen our working relationship with each other. And I'm just talking about this through, my little world, my little lane of the policy development team. So I looked at the city code that outlines PCEP's roles, duties, et cetera, and just sort of focused on your policy related focus. So improving policies and practices, promoting transparency and equity in those practices, and offering recommendations that strengthen tools that decrease the use of force. I think that we have a shared focus, our team personally. Again, I want to believe that that's the focus of the Bureau as well, but I can only speak of my experience and our team's focus specifically. And I have, one very concrete recommendation that I would offer up for your consideration, but just broadly speaking, I think, I didn't say a lot about my background, but my background is not in law enforcement. This was my first role in law enforcement. My professional and educational career has been in public policy and sort of different areas. And so I'm even 10 years on still learning about this work. And I think that's, having a learning posture, being open to having candid conversations with folks who are impacted by our policies, which I'm absolutely willing to do. But having that sort of a learning posture is important to figuring out how to improve our policies and practices from my perspective. And so, I certainly recommend, to the extent possible, I know this is a volunteer gig for everybody, and so I appreciate your time and respect your time. But so to the extent possible, identifying opportunities to connect with folks in PPB outside of this space. I've had coffee with PCEP members, and it was super helpful. I thought, Dory, when I met with, I don't think Kip, you were able to make it, but the chairs of this committee, to sort of talk about some of the specific changes behind a policy. And so there was just like space to have a little more kind of one-on-one conversation about policy, looking into other agencies' policies to sort of, again, frame out what's happening at the local level, at the state level, at the national level as a reference point. I'm going on a ride-along tomorrow. I try to go on ride-alongs as often as possible because it's particularly with different folks on the same shift or in the same service area, to see how individual officers think differently. All of that informs me speaking as Ashley Lancaster, my attempts at improving policy and practices. So those are just sort of like broad 30,000 foot level recommendations. More specifically for our work, though, I think it would be helpful for us to understand what your policy priorities with this group or the full committee's policy priorities are. And so identifying specific directives that align with those sort of focus areas that we talked about on the last slide. And again, not telling you what to do, just offering up my observation and meeting with this group over the last few years. I think that knowing what your policy priorities are could potentially influence our priorities. Maybe we're not looking to review a policy at a particular time because it's not scheduled for review, but we might consider it if it's a policy priority of yours. And I'm not promising that, but it would be a factor that we would consider. But also it gives us sort of the heads up. So when we know that something is coming, we can try to work with you outside of that review cycle, because we do try to the extent possible, again, because of the duration of our reviews, we try to stick to those timelines, the 60 days, and then sort of keep things moving in the process. But we will coordinate with you, Dory, and anyone who's interested to have meetings, again, to the extent possible. I know people work, this is a volunteer gig, but to have meetings where we get into the weeds about a policy and answer specific questions because you've identified it as a policy priority. So it would be helpful if you can kind of give us a sense of what your specific interests are from a policy perspective, and then we can sort of coordinate from there. Any questions before I hand it off to Laurel for the quick walkthrough of our website? And then we, of course, will field questions at the end of the presentation. Stop sharing, and I believe Laurel will need to be made a host to be able to share her screen as well, if possible.
Yes, we will work on that.
There you go, Laura. You should have access.
Thank you. Okay, share this one. All right, can I see that? Can everyone see that? It should be the City of Portland website. Yes. We'll start there. So I have this bookmarked, but if you're looking for our directives page, this is what you would do. You could just go to the website and put in police directives, and a couple things will come up. This would be our policy manual, but right now I'm going to take you to this one called Overview, Directives, Review, and Development Process. This is what we'll work from for right now, and I highly recommend everybody bookmark, anybody who's interested in policy, bookmark this page. It's very useful. It has everything. It's your home base and your dashboard for all things Portland Police Bureau policy. So this is an overview of our process, a link to Directive 10, popular directive in the chat that governs our review and development process. There's also a link here for the directives manual. That's the same as the link here, directives manual. That's all the active directives. This is a new link for open engagement. We're excited about this process. This is a place where you can also once again link to the manual. You can link to here an anonymous survey where you can just say, hey, directive, fill in the blank here, provide feedback here, optional, put your contact information. This is an anonymous survey to just provide. The idea with this is to provide feedback about any directive that's not currently up for public comment. So one note about this is if you are posting on something that was just up for public comment, this is not a backdoor into that. We might not be able to get to that. We're not monitoring this on that same timely schedule as public comment, but we are monitoring it all the time. And anything that we get, we'll incorporate it if we can and if there's time, or we'll hold it till the next review. So this is just to review or comment on anything that's not up for review at any time. We can also do that by clicking this link and just emailing us directly. It'll come up with an email. I don't need to go there. This is the public comment period page. Are you all still seeing this? The web page, right? Didn't pull up my email.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. This is where we post our draft directives for now, a more accessible and helpful 60-day review for you all and for everyone. You can see all of the things that are up for review here, and they are all in PDFs. It'll tell you when this ends, when the comment period ends. If you click on the PDF, that's how you can get access to the survey for that specific directive. And if you want to comment on that, this same little heading and link will be on the top of every page of every draft directive. And that link will go specifically to a survey just relevant to that directive. And we'll collect all the public comments for that directive in that one place. So
If
here
I
you
may,
can,
well,
yeah, go ahead.
just one thing I want to point out while you're on this page, and I want to give a shout out to Conrad. A few, maybe like a year or so ago, Conrad, you'd asked us to provide just like a brief description of the changes, and we started doing that because of you. So I just wanted to give you your flowers for making that recommendation. And, certainly we could, maybe be more descriptive, but we tried to be responsive to that. We thought it was a great recommendation. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. So that's where every policy here, these are all up for comment. They're all drafts. They all, a couple of them end at different times. And yes, there's a little blurb of the change that hopes to just summarize the really big high level points. So we're still on the same content really of the directives overview. I'm not going to keep going back to it because all of the relevant pages are right here on this right-hand menu. So the next page that I'll take you to is the directives pending enactment or rescission. We couldn't get it written over there for website reasons, but all directives that we are about to implement or get rid of, we will post here for 30 days before it becomes official. So right now, there's a directive that's no longer relevant, petty cash, because there is no petty cash, that's pending rescission. Another one about confidential information, which is not what it seems. These are all just directives that are going away because they are governed by other things or no longer relevant. But this is also where if we were putting a new directive into place, this would be the final draft for 30 days before it goes into effect. And then we did, I don't remember if you talked about this, Ashley, but one thing that we have, and I'm not sure that it's going to work because this link is a little iffy sometimes, but we have something called executive summaries. And if you're really passionate about policy and want to go to a deep dive into our process and really understand the why behind what any policy was changed, we have this link. And for every policy that we've done over the last, 7 to 10 years, we, this is in order, we upload summaries explaining the changes in a PDF. And it's a little document that you can click on that will show you a 2-page summary explaining the review process, discussing the public comments that we received, and then when it goes into effect. And so this is available. We might be a little behind on posting them, but eventually they all get posted so you can see the kind of the history of that directive and why we made the changes that we did. I want to go to one last thing, which is just to show you an example of a directive. And I'll go to Directive 10, our favorite directive. And I want to show you this area in the top right-hand corner. These documents are either just documents that are relevant to this directive or documents that are old drafts that we posted. So this, for example, says that if it says executive summary here and then it has an effective date, anything with an executive summary means that's a policy that we enacted, that's official. So that's the most recent date here. That also corresponds to the date at the bottom. The effective date was April 15th of this year. So that is correct. But on another policy, if we haven't enacted anything, you might notice that it's a different date connected to second universal review or first universal review, which are the old names for our public comment periods. Or it might now say, if it's a newer one that we've done recently, it'll say public comment period. But what you should know about those, the effective date is not a normal effective date. That's not the date that the policy was in effect. It's just the date that that draft was posted. So just for your information, if you're reading this on our page, you can know that the date at the bottom of a directive is always correct. And the date is also correct if it's related to executive summary. But if it's any other date on the right here, that's just talking about a relevant date for a draft. And that's all I got. And I'm so happy I could cry too. We appreciate you and thank you for your interest in this. And I'll just open it up to questions. And I'm going to stop sharing unless someone wants to see something. But I highly recommend review, bookmark our overview page.
Thank you both so much.
How do I do it? Stop share. Okay. I think, Conrad, do you have something?
Yes, I just wanted to quickly say thank you, right? And have that be part of the public record. And I just wanted to call out so we don't lose sight of it. It's all about accessibility, right? And it's all about making it approachable to community members. And that's what we're seeing. And that goes so far and means a lot. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Conrad. We appreciate that. It means a lot.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna. Thank you guys. I had a couple questions for y'all. First of all, do you guys is there a way to sign up for alerts, like email alerts about like when a new policy comes out? Is that just on the website?
Great question. Laurel, do you still have your website, your page open? We can show you.
Yeah,
We'll
I'll share it. Sorry, I missed.
And we'll send the link to you, Dory. Maybe you can distribute it to folks.
On our
if that's okay.
overview, that same overview page, are you seeing it? Or no, probably not yet. There we go.
No.
This same page that I was working from before, I kind of navigated off it, but there's a link right here. Get notified via email when directives are posted to this website, and then that'll sign you up for the Gov delivery. And if you're already signed up for other things, when you put it in, it'll just present, I'll show, you can, I think, let's see. I think it'll just let you select more options. I'm not going to do this
Okay.
the little thing right now, but yeah, if you do it and you're already signed up, it'll just have a checkbox, and I think it'll be clear. It's either PPB policies or PPB directives.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And also for the public and for PCCEP, if you guys have any advice about how to sort of educate yourself. So when you're giving comment, like what cities you guys look to, how you do your own research so that people can do their research, and when they're giving public comment, have like sort of the same footing that you guys are working off of.
Yeah, that might be something that we can. Let us discuss it internally, but that might be something that we can incorporate into the executive summary. I certainly can see a world in which, if we're like meeting with you, with your team, with your group, where we would share that. This is going to be kind of a crazy answer, but there's not a lot of great policy out there. So sometimes we'll look at other policies and it's not particularly helpful in trying to like advance us and being better. But I think that's still maybe a helpful data point to share with you. Like, we looked at such and such agencies and didn't find any utility in those policies.
Are there any cities that you feel like you like looking at their policies? I mean, I guess that's just a personal question. And
well, so it just sort of depends on the subject. We'll often look at other cities that are under a consent decree or settlement agreement. We'll look at other, we'll look to Seattle just as sort of like regional similarities and demographics. And I really I can't speak to their actual policing, just strictly talking about policy. I really like the way that Baltimore presents its information. They are under, I don't know what the status of their consent decree is. We've looked to Austin and San Francisco, Oakland, and It just sort of depends on the subject of the directive, but we have a few just go-tos. Again, I wouldn't say personally there are many agencies where I'm just like, oh my gosh, they're getting it right. Because, it's we have a lot of work to do in policing. I'll just put it that way.
I appreciate that. I have a couple more questions, but I think I'll wait to see if other folks.
Sure.
And well, I guess, Gabby, would you like this to be open to questions from the public as well at this time?
Yes.
Yeah, so members of the public, feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. Or feel free to think on them, and Gabby, maybe you can continue.
Okay, thank you. I'm just very curious about how it goes with the union, those conversations, and if something is in the best interest of the public, but the union is putting up resistance, what that conversation looks like, sounds like, and any sort of frustrations or like tactics you have to get through those situations.
I would say the point at which, and this, I think it's not an overstatement to say that it doesn't happen that often, but the point at which it becomes maybe adversarial, or where there's significant like distance between what we're trying to do and what the union wants, we're kind of removed from those conversations. Those become like legal conversations. I think we have a pretty good, and Laurel, feel free to jump in if you have a different take on this or want to frame it differently, but I think we have a pretty good working relationship with them, and trying to understand their perspective and still advocate for the policy that we present to them, and them being receptive to that. I would say, many of the without getting into, right, because it's sort of like privileged conversation specifics, but most of the disagreements that we have are mostly just like semantics and word choice, and like under them wanting to understand why we're making certain changes. Other than the sort of big ticket items like the body worn camera negotiations, which I'm, not a part of until they specifically start talking about policy. Obviously masking identification, the city ordinance, that was a big, issue for them. Things tend to run pretty smoothly between our two groups. Laurel, anything that you want to add to that?
Nope, you pretty much totally covered it. It's usually our conversations sort of clarify, to explain why, to say, hey, what does this mean to you guys? And we share that. And then if they assert bargaining rights, it's another conversation, and that's just really the only thing that it would be about.
Okay, great.
I think there's another question, Babs V.
Hi there, thank you. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, my
Yes.
name is Babs Vanelli, 78-year-old lifelong Portlander, currently in District 2, and I've lived in this part of town for about 25 years now. And I have been politically active in various cycles all the years of my life. And maybe I missed this because I started tuning in when I was still at the grocery store. But what's your interaction specifically with the city councilors? Let's not focus on the mayor right now. I'm just curious about how much contact, how much input, whatever. How much they know about what you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question, Babs. We don't have a lot of direct contact with city council. It just sort of changes from council to council. In the past, I've had a little more contact with council staff. But we also have, and maybe Adrian, not to put you on the spot, but you might be able to speak to this. You might be better equipped to speak to this than I can. But I think there are more sort of official channels for communication with council, and not all conversations are necessarily within the scope of policy. But the short answer is, Babs, our team doesn't have a lot of direct contact with them. If there are policy related issues that surface in council, we will usually, like, for example, with masking, the masking ordinance, we worked directly with the deputy chief who was in consult with city council staff.
Okay.
And so that isn't to say that the Bureau doesn't have contact with city council staff. It's just our team specifically doesn't have a lot of direct contact with them unless they requested or there's a specific reason for us to be there.
Okay, thank you. And part of why I'm asking is because the police chief, Robert Day, correct? Robert Day, has appeared before city council numerous times in the last few months. And I have watched numerous city council meetings. And yes, there was quite a lot of discussion about ICE. And the city councilor who was advocating most strongly for that happened to be Samir Canal, who's in my district too. But it did see, and there were other police representatives who have appeared before city council in the last 6 or 8 months. That's why I asked. But I understand then your role, that's a specific division and a specific focus that wouldn't necessarily involve involvement with city council members. Did I summarize that correctly?
I think that's correct. Yes. Perfect, Babs.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, keep up the good work, by the way. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Hey, Kip.
Yeah, hi. First of all, thank you for the presentation and continuing coming back and answering our questions. I really do appreciate it. First of all, I want to say I'm grateful to see, just in the time that I've been on PCCEP, see a arc of more accessibility and some I'm gonna say some fundamental changes in the approach to all of this. So it's really great to see. Sorry, I'm fighting a cold, so I'm having trouble speaking a little bit. Taking direct input, Conrad, thank you for your contributions. I know Dan Handelman had over time put in a bunch of recommendations. I've made some mentions as well. Seeing the evolution of this is pretty phenomenal, so I really do appreciate that. One thing that I think the first time I was introduced to the directive process directly, so to speak, that came up was an accessibility issue for folks that are not as technically adept. I think that's one area of improvement that can still be looked at, but I haven't taken into account all the recent changes. So I want to kind of do a mini assessment and get back to you guys on that. But I just want to say, overall, I really appreciate the improvements we're seeing.
Thank you so much, Kip. And I see that's actually related to a question I saw in the chat from Mark Porras. Thank you for your kind words about the presentation. It says, would be great to have that, the presentation on the website as a video tutorial that's embedded right there on the directives overview page. I suspect that would lower the barrier for lots of folks to feel comfortable submitting feedback. So thank you for that suggestion, Mark. What would you want that tutorial, if you don't mind, or if anybody has any suggestions, what would you want that tutorial to consist of? Just kind of what I did with walking through the website?
Yeah.
Like a video of it?
Sure. That would be awesome.
Okay. We'll certainly look into that. I don't know. I've never done anything like that, but I think, and yeah, we can
explore that.
We'll
That
note
might
it
be
and
that might be achievable. Yeah, that might be achievable.
Yeah,
And I
you
just
could even
want to
just pull it out of this recording. You probably just cut that clip out of there, or you could do, do it over with other stuff too. But yeah, thanks.
No, I'm glad it was
I will
helpful. I hope that other people could see it, and then that will be a nice walkthrough. So thank you.
And it's good to see you, Mark. I know that you've pointed out, to Kip's point, some of the accessibility challenges with our website and just some of our notifications as well. And we have alerted our internal folks about that. And again, full disclosure, I have my own frustrations with our city website. It's kind of difficult to track down information, but we'll look into our ability to create and possibly post a video tutorial as well. That might be doable.
Yeah, I wouldn't ask you guys to fix the city accessibility because that's a monumental problem. So, but yeah.
Any other questions?
Are there any questions we forgot to ask that we should have asked?
I appreciate that question. I'll continue to think about that, particularly in the context of the prompt, Dory, that you sent to me, just sort of exploring ways that we can strengthen the collaboration between our team and the committee. I loved your question about finding a way to speak to other agencies that we're researching. So I'll think about a good medium for that. But no, this was a really fruitful discussion, and I appreciate everyone's time, and we're happy to come back anytime. Like I said, to try to coordinate offline too. If you have specific sort of in the weeds questions about directives, happy to organize something to discuss those in more detail.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashley and Laurel. It was really informative. I feel, I've been on the committee for a bit, and I feel much more informed and like excited about working together and whatnot. All right. Well, Dory, should we move on to public comment generally? So do you have any comments from the public about things we've discussed today, what you'd like to see PCCEP work on, or anything else? Now's a great time to talk about it. We have about 20 minutes of the meeting left. Thanks, Mark.
Hi, thanks. Mark, again, I should have said Mark Forrest, he, him pronouns, and I'm with Portland Cop Watch. This kind of ties in with the directives process and current events. PPP just had an officer retire who was under investigation for domestic violence. This officer is going to be sentenced next week. And I was looking back at some news articles from many years ago with the officer, and I was just wondering about in this, nobody's obviously going to be able to talk about this particular case, but there may have been some red flags in the past that could have predicted this. And I want to make sure that the Bureau really is able to live up to its, desire to be a learning institution. And there's a directive, I can't remember what I was looking at today, 330, the internal affairs investigations, and how the Bureau relinquishes jurisdiction when an officer resigns or retires. And I think if that's actually the case here, I think the community, the Bureau, the members, family members of police officers are really going to lose out by cutting off an investigation into some misconduct or something like this that happens when an officer separates from the Bureau. So I just wanted to put that on the record. It's something that I would like to see changed in the policies, but I don't really know what the status is of that or how to go about getting that to happen.
Thanks, Mark. Let's go to Debbie next, and then Pastor Weisner.
Hi, Debbie Iona, League of Women Voters of Portland. First, I want to thank you for sharing the JCTF letter with the group. This campaign has been working on this issue for over 25 years. And so it's good to have you highlight that for the committee and all of us who are watching you. Second thing, the settlement agreement requires, and this is probably really appropriate more for your community engagement committee, but since it's on my mind, I'm going to say it now anyway. The police bureau is supposed to be presenting its annual report at 3 precinct meetings according to the settlement agreement. And they did one from what I was on vacation, so I couldn't go, but I understand they've canceled the other 2 because of a lack of participation. And so I think possibly it might help if PCCEP could work with the Bureau to help them think of ways to promote the precinct meetings more broadly so that we get more community members to come and engage with the Bureau over their annual report and have a dialogue. I think that's a really great opportunity that the DOJ included in the settlement agreement, and I hate to see it, just go by the wayside. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Debbie. Does anyone have a response to that? I just want to make sure we're in dialogue. If that's how the hands are coming up. Okay. Pastor Wisener, I think you're next.
I think maybe Captain Lindsay might go to my question or thought from Mark. So I'll wait till after he speaks and see if he addresses, so I won't be a long time trying to pull it out.
Well, what's your question, Pastor? I did want to address Mark's comment, but I want to clarify it if I could. If Mark's
Yeah,
still here.
thank you. I'm under the impression that even though that they resign from the Bureau, criminal investigation is still pending for anything that is under that officer is being charged. And if going to Mark's point, under the Bureau being able to have a watch earlier sign and all those other things, I don't know if there is any way other than, and I'm just using something that's not reporting to this specific, but as an example, possible eliminating the extended licensing to practice any other jurisdiction that the Bureau could possibly use, as if there was something that they resign before they can complete the organizational discipline pace. So I'm wondering if those, going to Mark's thought, is that accurate pretty much? And is that possible from the Bureau's areas of not being able to complete an investigation?
So what I can tell you, unless Barb, did you want to comment on this as well before I go on my little spiel here? I saw your hand come up. I saw your hand come up too, so I just want to make sure I'm not going to.
It's been up for a minute. You're good.
Okay, so what I can tell you is that if an officer is accused of something criminal that's outside of our jurisdiction, it is under the authority of that jurisdiction to investigate that criminally. That being said, when that occurs, we still open up a companion internal affairs administrative investigation against that. What we then do is called tolling. We toll for the criminal case because there's varying laws that come into effect and that are allowed under criminal and administrative investigations. Like, for example, we can compel someone to come in and speak to us. You can't compel someone during a criminal investigation. They can assert their Miranda rights and such, and they can assert their Fifth Amendment rights as well. But that being said, once that criminal is done outside of the external agency, when that's completed, we will then continue to go forward with the internal administrative investigation. However, if that member does resign, all that does is they're no longer under our authority, and we cannot compel them to come in and talk to us. We still continue the investigation, and we go as far as we can, with or without their interview, their statements without evidence they could provide. So a lot of the times, and I can't get into specifics, but this does happen. A lot of the times what occurs is that we continue the investigation and we just don't get a compelled interview from the involved member. Once that is done, though, however, we still go through the process all the way up and through the PRB, and we would make recommendations on corrective action and discipline for that case as if the member were still employed by the city and the police bureau. We continue that process all the way through. We send them an outcome letter that states, hey, had you still been employed here, this is what your discipline and or corrective action would have been. And if the case is serious enough to warrant what's called either an economic sanction, as in a suspension without pay, or up to continuing like demotion or termination, those cases then get reviewed by DPSST. They get sent to the state, and then the state can decide whether to decertify them from ever becoming a law enforcement officer in the state of Oregon again. So it doesn't just end, essentially, is what I guess what I'm trying to say.
That was my understanding as well. Thank you.
Thanks for that information. That is very helpful. Mark, did you have a response to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I guess I need to read the directive again and just make sure. I appreciate that's what the process is and that's what's happening. And I 100% agree that that's the way it should work. And I just didn't see that in the directive itself. But then you also brought up the idea of the tolling. And I feel like I had a conversation with the independent monitor or with someone else about the idea of running concurrent criminal and administrative investigations. And I thought I heard that in some jurisdictions, they're able to do that by setting up a firewall somehow, so that you don't have to wait for the criminal investigation to end, for the administrative investigation to begin. So I was just wondering if you're able to address that.
I would have to, in full disclosure, I would have to go look at those agencies and locations and see how exactly they do it. I know generally our practice is we'd like the criminal to be completely done, so then we're not pulling the member in to interview 3 or 4 or 5 times or pulling people. So like the criminal uncovers something, you know, because they have like specific subpoena power that we may not have. And so they may continually get more information. And so then we're constantly in the administrative side behind, like, for example, we cannot hypothetically subpoena Facebook. Like we can't anything that may involve like social media, or we can't subpoena like certain phone records, right? And so they may continue to, and those take time. So they may continue to uncover more and more information that we may want to question them on, that we can't question them on, because again, we can compel the interview. And so we may not, when we bring someone in to an administrative investigation, we want to make sure we have all the information from the criminal in front of us, and that is completely done, so we know exactly how to conduct that interview and that investigation going forward. Does that make sense? As opposed to constantly being like kind of behind the 8 ball, where we bring them in and then we're done with that specific interview, and then the criminal comes back and says, oh wait, we've actually got something more here that took time to uncover, so then we got to bring them back in. We just like to kind of get it done all in one shot. It's much cleaner that way, as opposed to just kind of going on in this kind of choppy way of going forward. But I'm not opposed to looking at how other jurisdictions or agencies do it. I'm not aware of any that do it that way. Is all I'm trying to say.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
I just want to do a time check. There's 7 minutes left. Barb, your hand is up.
Yes, it is. And I have a number of comments and questions. One, I would really like Captain Lindsay to define tolling for me. I kind of get that it sounds like it's a sequential versus parallel process. I put it in the chat that I'm wondering what happened to the part where PCCEP was supposed to have the police public meeting, the report that they give to the precincts, I thought was supposed to go in front of or to PCEP first. And I'm wondering what happened to that. Did it roll off in the settlement agreement paragraphs that are rolling off? And I do want to thank you guys for organizing this tonight. It was really, really nice and helpful. I'm going to stop there.
Real quick regarding tolling, tolling is essentially just a term for that just pauses the investigation, because under the DOJ settlement agreement, we're required to finish investigations within a 180-day timeline. And so we just use the term tolling that once we kick off an investigation, we have 180 days to complete it. But if there's a concurrent criminal going at the same time, we essentially open it, but we don't, that's when the clock starts for us. The moment we open up a case, that 180-day clock starts. When there's a criminal going on, we just use the term tolling, as in we halt our investigation, wait for the criminal to be completed, and then once the criminal is completed, we then go forward with our investigation, and then we add up the days, that the amount of time it takes to complete our administrative side, but then we subtract the amount of time we had to toll, if that makes sense. So if we go, if the criminal investigation takes 50 days to complete, we do our investigation and we're 50 days over the 180-day timeline, we just subtract that 50, and then we're allowed to be quote unquote under that 180-day timeline because you had to toll or wait for the criminal to be completed. Does that make sense? Trying to be faster and trying to be respectful of people's time.
Yes, thank
Anybody
you.
have an answer for this, my second question?
Can you repeat your second question, Barb, please?
Yeah, it's really
Yeah,
not.
please, sorry.
No, that's okay. It's more a PCEP question. I thought that the community meetings that Debbie Iona was talking about, that they do for the precinct community meetings, whatever, that report, for some reason, I thought that was, not for some reason, I remember that it was supposed to come in front of PCEP or to PCEP. I don't know if there was a requirement for there to be a PCEP meeting around it, or if it was just PCEP members, or if I'm high on track, or if it rolled off the settlement agreement. Good timing there, Dory. I'm not really high on crack, folks.
Yeah, so the requirement is that PPP, I believe that PPP send the report to PCEP for their review, which did take place. There is no requirement to have a public meeting at PCEP about it. We have done it before. And quite honestly, feedback, I think both from community members and PCEP members, was a little bit mixed. And so I think we have not opted to do it in a couple of years.
Is there any desire for that now from the community? Anybody want to share about that?
Oh no, it was really boring. I'm not gonna recommend you guys have a meeting around it. Ah, I got the cop to smile.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, regarding the precinct meetings, I don't think it's worthwhile for you all to do anything, but it would be worthwhile for the Bureau to actually hold those meetings. And I just don't really buy the line that, there weren't enough people showing up, and that it's not easy to publicize this thing. I mean, I get so many emails from being on the PPB news email list, and I mean, how many thousands of people in the city got the mayor's ridiculous email today? All of those emails could easily have a footer that publicizes, probably one of the most important bureaus in the city when they're having their annual meetings. And I think you could really drive engagement that way with the community by piggybacking onto some of the other mailing lists that both the Bureau has and that the mayor and the city councilors have. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. And Pastor Weisner, I think this will be the last comment here.
Thank you, and I don't mean to keep nailing behind what Mark is saying, but I do concur. Transparency, accountability, and everything that it takes for the Bureau to continue to have something as if 5, 10, 15, or 20, whatever it may be. I understand how limited a lot of people are with staffing and all those other things, but there is enough concern of history that says these reports are important to the community. I don't know who made the decision that it needed to not complete, but I personally felt that it was skirting the issue. I thought it was not a good decision. It should have just, I personally, not as PCCEP, not co-chair, but Pastor Weisner, felt that that was something that was just, I could not understand it myself.
Thanks, Pastor Weisner. Okay, I think that takes us right to time. So Gabby, I will just hand it to you to wrap us up.
Okay, thanks everybody for being here. Our next full committee meeting is Wednesday, July 1st, which is next week, next Wednesday. And our next policy meeting is Wednesday, July 22nd at 6 p.m. And we very much look forward to seeing you then. You can always
Thank you
email
so
us
much, everybody.
comments. Thank you so much.
Great discussion
you.
tonight. Appreciate everyone for your